Hey everybody, it's Donna Cravata, and this is the Real 50 Over 50, and it's our first wisdom panel. And this is the Boundaries edition. And this came about because the woman that we had scheduled to interview today was unavailable, and she found out last minute that something happened and she couldn't be here today. And last night we had our first Real 50 Over 50 event to where everyone could meet each other. And these lovely women volunteered to do a panel. So we put this together at the last minute. We are pretty unprepared, but we don't care. We're here, we're live, and we're going to share about boundaries. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments and we'll try and get to them. If you're watching on the replay, we will come back. Please tag us and we'll come back and we'll answer. And I am going to let everybody introduce themselves, and then we are just going to get into a conversation about boundaries. Lisa, would you like to start?
Sure. So I'm Lisa Danforth. I am from Vermont. I am a leadership coach and a work-life well-being strategist. And part of that, a main part of that, is actually boundaries. I believe that boundaries truly are the bridge to everything that we want because they connect us. They allow us to say no without apology. I think boundaries are one of the most powerful tools that we can implement to create the life that we want to live and the relationships that we want to experience. And as a 30-year, 6-time entrepreneur, I know that when I'm struggling, it's because I'm not implementing boundaries. I'm not able to prioritize my goals and my needs. And then it just makes things difficult. So I can't wait to dig in and discuss boundaries with everyone.
Okay, and Susannah?
Hello, I am Susannah Steers, and I live in North Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I am a Pilates and integrated movement specialist and owner of Moving Spirit Pilates here in North Van. And when it comes to boundaries, I think exercise is probably the low-hanging fruit. It's something that we can do to learn about our boundaries, to learn about how we relate to the world. But the next stage of that is really starting to understand through a movement practice how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to the world and how we can navigate either creating stronger boundaries where we need them, recognizing the patterns that we have around maybe not standing up and putting boundaries in place, and also understanding our own internal boundaries and how we may have compartmentalized things. We may have set boundaries in place that worked for a while that maybe aren't serving us now. And so looking for a way to kind of integrate some of those. So I am really excited to dig into this topic as well. Thanks for the invitation, Donna.
Me too. I mean, I think we can go for 6 hours. and Amy?
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm Amy Thurman, and I live with a broken neck. So I'm a disabled entrepreneur and a story development coach. I help you discover what story you're telling yourself and decide if that's the story you want to be telling yourself. Is that the story you want to be living? And if not, then I teach you we go through 100 different emotions to figure out what story do you want to be living. If this is not the story you want to be living, then I teach you how to figure out what story you want to be living. And we walk through that. I live in Oklahoma with my teenage son and our 2 chickens, Lumos and Knox. And I'm so excited to chat with you all today about boundaries, about setting boundaries within ourselves, not only with other people, but within ourselves as well.
Okay, so I actually have a question for everybody. Have your relationships with boundaries changed after you turned 50?
Most definitely. I think I would have to say for me, I was able to set stronger boundaries with way less effort. What doesn't serve me, I can cut out a lot more easily than I used to be. I perhaps that's a matter of just experience over the years, but certainly it's a lot easier for me to say hell yes or hell no.
Anyone else?
I know since I turned 50, I spent like so many years before that worrying about what other people think. Did I fit in where I'm supposed to fit in? Was I meeting everyone else's expectations? And after I turned 50, I was like, no, it's my turn. Like, it's my turn. I'm going to fit in where I want to fit in. I'm going to meet my expectations and not worry about what everybody else thinks or expects of me. And so absolutely, yes. After 50, yes.
That's
For me as well. I will say I've been an advocate of boundaries since my 20s or 30s, but I've been leaning into them more, especially in my 50s, and really understanding that our boundaries are about us, because it's a lot of what I teach with my clients. So it allows us to be much more unapologetic about establishing a boundary so that we can prioritize the life that we want, to be able to say no. So 100% yes.
okay. So now we have a question from the audience from Angela. She wants you, Lisa, she wants you to talk more about how boundaries are a connection.
Love that question, Angela. Thank you. My main assistant right there.
Yeah. and I'm sure that everybody else could chime in on this as well, because we're all approaching this from a different perspective.
So I like to say that boundaries are the bridge. It's the connection to what we want, the art to achieve our goals. And a lot of times people will be like, what are you talking about? Because boundaries we always perceive as divisive, as mean, as we're not being nice if we're establishing our boundaries. But what I have found is it is nearly impossible to achieve our goals, whatever those goals are for each individual. I mean, it could be something incredibly small to absolutely massive. But we need to be able to say no unapologetically so that we can prioritize the actions that we need to take to achieve what it is that we want, whether it is a healthy, authentic relationship with ourselves or with others, right? Or if it is achieving our goals, marking out time on our calendar for thinking, for self-care, for lead gen, whatever it is. We as women specifically, men definitely struggle a bit, but women specifically will add things to our calendar when it's already overbooked. And that means that when we're saying yes to one thing, we're saying no to something else. So when we implement our boundaries, it is, in my opinion, the connection to all that we want, and letting go of the things that are weighing us down and pushing us away from what we want to experience in this life.
Brilliant.
It's funny, a coach once said to me many years ago, and Ruth Andermatt, if you're listening, this is for you. She said to me, what are you tolerating in your life right now? And that really resonated for me in terms of setting boundaries. It was like, well, here are all these things that I'm doing that really I don't need to be doing. I'm not really interested in doing that. I think I need to be, helping to placate other people. And then I took that another step further and recognized that there's a lot of that going on in the body as well. So when I'm working with people, recognizing, that ache in your shoulder, the pain in your back, the whatever it is, as you start to play with those things, you start to understand that there's a physical manifestation of some of those things that we are not saying no to. And it can often show up in the body in pretty powerful ways. So that's a little quote that sticks with me, and I trot it out whenever I feel like I'm overwhelmed, and it really just brings me right back to what I need to be focusing in on in a moment.
That's so good. Lisa, you mentioned, and this resonates with me so deeply, that boundaries are a form of self-care. Like, that's how I see it. It's a form of self-care. I created a document called 10 Steps to Showing Yourself Self-Love, and it's free. It's on my website if anybody wants it. But one of those steps is firing the friends that are not good for you. Firing the friends that are not there, that are not going to be supportive for you, that are not cheering you on, that are pulling you down. And that may sound harsh, but it's a form of self-care. I'm not doing myself any good by tying myself to people like that. And so that's one of the steps, is firing them and doing it in a kind way, of course.
Yeah. It's so true. And we have another comment from somebody in the audience. Leslie says that boundaries are hard for avoiders and people pleasers. Anything to add to that?
Lisa's going to jump right in there.
So, I mean, it feels so divisive, right? When we establish boundaries, and that means that we stop establishing those boundaries. But study after study shows that the people who are the most compassionate are the one also the most boundaried. And the reason for that is we don't have resentment when we're not saying yes to something that we don't want to do and no to the things that we do want to do, right? So for people pleasers, the question is, are you willing to put other people's priorities or demands ahead of yours? And are you, to lovingly nudge you here, are you building a healthy, authentic relationship with the people around you when you are not honoring who you are and showing up as that person, right? So when we can connect to the goals that we want within that relationship, whether it's personal or professional, we can start putting the people pleasing away and connect to deepening our relationship with ourselves and with others. I could go on and on and on about that, but I'm going to hand it off.
Okay.
I think with me, it has a lot to do with self-worth. Like for so long, I didn't see myself as valuable enough to be able to set those boundaries because I just didn't see myself as worthy. But really, after I turned 50, I'm like, no, I am worthy. I need to be doing this for myself. And I think so often we look at it from a different perspective where we think about other people instead of ourselves. And that flip kind of switched. That's not right. Is that right? That switch flipped after I turned 50, where I'm, like I said, it's my turn. I am worth this. I am worth setting boundaries.
Yeah. And Dawn is chiming in from the audience too. Some people need to fire themselves. They're the friend that needs to be fired. So being self-aware of this is important. Yes. Absolutely.
So good. So good.
Yeah. And let me see. Well, we got all kinds of stuff. Leslie says that her switch was flipped at 58. So now, how about if we talk about what was that defining moment where you realized that, I mean, you may not even known it was a boundary, but, like what's that part of your story where you knew that, you could no longer do what you were doing, that you you had to do something else and you had to make a decision and you had to pick a direction. Like, what was that defining moment? I know Amy has one.
I'll go ahead and go first. In 2014, I passed out and landed on my face on the hardwood floor. The impact sheared my brainstem, caused a traumatic brain injury, and it broke my neck, but that went undetected for 6 months. So I continued to live with a broken neck. I can only hold my head up for a few hours at a time. But that first year after the accident, I had to lay flat in a bed for 23 hours of every day for nearly a year. Missed everything going on around me. And it was such a deep, dark place, as you can imagine, that I prayed to die. I did not want to live. I was merely existing. I was not living. And I knew I had enough medication to make it happen. I had a plan. I was done with this. I did not want to live that life anymore. And then I was able to flip that switch, I guess, as you would say. I had this moment of clarity where I set a boundary, as Donna put it this way, and I never thought about it like that, but it's so true, where I decided, you know what, I'm fighting so hard to die right now. Why? Why does that have to be the answer? The answer does not have to be dying. The answer can be fighting to live instead. And so I decided to take the energy I was using to fight to die and use it to fight to live, with the intention of using my story to help other people. And so being able to just see myself from a different perspective, change that whole mindset, and set that boundary of, no, this is what I'm doing instead, made such a difference in my life. And that's why I'm here today, because of that one moment where I decided I'm worth it. I am worth it. So I'm going to do this. And I have.
And we're so glad you are.
Thank you.
Okay. That's a tough act to follow, but anybody have a boundary story?
I do. Mine, actually, I remember so specifically. I'm sitting lakeside at my family's camp, ice in the middle of winter, looking out over the frozen lake. Sun was rising, beautiful pink crystal all over the lake. I'm sipping my coffee, reading Brene Brown's book, and I read, "Fitting in is the greatest barrier to belonging." And I literally stopped mid-sip. and saw my life flash before my eyes. And I could see all of the struggles that I had were because I felt the need to fit in because I wouldn't belong as I am. As a child, I learned at a very young age to be the good girl, right? To get the pat on the head so I could avoid the wrath from doing something that was not approved, let's just say, even if it was just something minor. And I could see how I took that through my entire life of feeling the need to fit in. So I would do what I felt I needed to do to either gain approval, to whatever it may be. And I could connect it eventually to, it was boundaries. I wasn't establishing boundaries for me to show up as the person that I wanted to be, that I was saying yes to so many things because I felt that I needed to. I felt guilty if I didn't. I didn't feel that I could. So when I really realized this and understood the need for boundaries and how that actually created deep connections to myself, to my spouse, to my family, that I was showing up, that for me allowed me to be far more unapologetic about saying no. Because saying yes, I would absolutely have resentment. I mean, how many here have ever said yes to a request and walked away and thought, I can't believe they just asked me that. Right? We say yes. And I found myself doing that. So it was just this light bulb moment that went off that I realized I can shift things and I don't have to try to fit in order to create the success that I want to.
Beautiful.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So, Susannah, do you have one?
Well, yeah, I don't know that I had I did have a really super profound aha moment, but that came rather late. I think for me, it was sort of measured over the years. I started off in my career as a dancer and an athlete. And what I internalized growing up in that environment was, push hard. There are no excuses, no matter what. If you're going to succeed, you have to show up hard 100% every day, no matter what is going on in your world. And so I learned to sort of put everything outside, put the blinkers on, and make happen what I needed to make happen. And a lot of the time as a young person, you're rewarded for that, right? You get all the, yay, you're doing the stuff, you're working hard, you're doing the things you need to do. Transition that into business, and then that's a whole other environment, and I'm approaching it exactly the same way. And there's no way I'm going to say no, and there's no way I'm going to say, ooh, that's a little too much on my plate, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. So I had therapy along the way to help me recognize where, pardon me, some of those old patterns weren't serving me, and really they didn't serve me then either. But I think the one that really knocked me on my butt was when COVID happened. And here I was running a business. It's a service business. People are coming to see me. I have lots of people that I could serve online, but I also have a lot of people that I really couldn't serve very well online. And so, early on, I was making the solutions happen. I got everything set up the way it was supposed to be. And then the rules would shift and, from one day to the next. So, I got shingles the day we were supposed to open back up in the studio again. I got shingles. And so, gee, where's my stress level? I wonder. So for me, I just had to let it fall apart. My body was dealing with all of the stress of that because I had recognized there were some issues that I hadn't dealt with, as part of this whole process. I learned how to not feel pain in my body very well. So, I would just compartmentalize that away and carry on. So all of those things came into this wonderful soup when COVID hit. And I just had to let it fall apart and figure out, okay, that's not working for me. I don't know what is, and I'm still figuring that out. But I think I'm finding a lot more of a humane way to be with me and a humane way to be in my body. And I know for sure that is helping me serve the people that I work with in a much more fulsome way, in a much more supportive way. So I guess, that little aha came late, but it was in little bits along the way before it clobbered me over the head.
Yeah, it was building. And the irony is, like, this is what you help people do. all the while this was building in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Heal thyself, right?
Yeah, sometimes it takes a while to hear that. Angela liked your COVID soup comment.
Ew.
I'd like to share one, and it has to do with Lisa, because Lisa helped me, define my boundaries because they were non-existent. And one of the when I was working with her, one of the things that one of the first things that we had to do was, define what makes us happy. I couldn't. I didn't know, because it had been so long, or maybe ever, that like it was a choice. It was like, oh, isn't happy accidental? And I didn't know that. And it had such a profound change that the next thing she had us do was a values exercise. And I was like, another values exercise. I've gone through all the Brene Brown training. I've read the books. I've done it all. I've taken clients through this. And I was like, oh, I'm always the same thing. I'm always the one that's reliable in these value exercises. Well, I did my values exercise and my values totally changed. They were now fun, creativity, which I was never allowed to be creative because my brother was the creative one, and apparently every family is allowed one creative person. And then genuine, and I didn't understand what genuine meant. I thought it was like be genuine with other people, and I'm like, if I'm nothing else, I'm genuine. I only show up as me. But what happened was I had to learn how to be genuine with myself. And that was, close the book. We could have been done there. We weren't, but I didn't see these things because, Susannah, just like you, I was so busy holding all the pieces together, but the pieces were soup. It's hard to hold soup together. Let me see. We've got another comment here. Oh, Lisa helped Angela see the relationship between boundaries and resentment. And resentment and I were close friends. Oh, were keyword right there.
Yeah.
Could we dive in on this a little bit?
Do you want me to jump in? I don't want to be the one that.
You go for it.
Yeah, that resentment piece is really big, and we don't even realize it's there. I can't tell you how many people I've spoken with that when we dig in deep and really understand where it's coming from, there's such a feeling of resentment because we don't feel like Donna, that we don't even know we have a choice. It's just the way that it's been. It's the way that we've shown up. Yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I have to fill everyone else's bucket, but we can't fill other people's bucket from an empty bucket. So when we can step back and take a meta view, we want to watch the movie, not be in the movie. When you're watching the movie, you can see all of the moving parts, all of the triggers and whatnot. We can look at, okay, I'm feeling resentment when I say or do this, when I'm out of alignment with what my core values are or who I see myself to be. So that resentment is such a big piece. And when we can tease it apart and, like I started to say in the beginning, connect to what it is that we want, we can then start pausing, one of my very, very favorite words, pausing and choosing differently, choosing intentionally. But the key is, like Donna was saying, we need to know what we want instead. Yeah. We also need to know, and then I'll drop it from here. We also need to know we don't want to focus on the bad habit, the habit that we're trying to remove. We want to focus on the habit that we want to put in. So if you're always saying yes and then feeling resentment, what is the choice that you want to start choosing in that moment, so that when you can take that meta view and understand what the feeling is within your body of when you're saying yes, when you want to say no, when that resentment, right? You can then have something very intentionally that you're going to choose. Again, you don't want to focus on the removal. You want to focus on what you're going to choose differently. And that starts to decrease the resentment. And the beauty of that is you start to feel differently in your body. You start to feel more joy. You actually start to feel and experience more success because you're doing the things that are pushing your life forward and others, but you've got to care for yourself first. Again, you can't fill from an empty bucket.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I love the relationship that you draw to the body on that one. I That's something we're looking at people's movement patterns, and oftentimes as you're teaching people new movement or exploring new things, they find that there are barriers. And at first it's, oh, I just can't do that. I'm not that person. And as we play with what those patterns are, people start to explore new ways of moving and recognize that some of the things that they've been holding, or some of those resentments or the patterns that show up that create those resentments, all of a sudden start to become a little clearer. And although we're not going in with, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. My work is in the body, and it's so great when you can start to see people really inhabiting their bodies and starting to understand their own patterns, and then being able to realize how that shows up in their lives and in their thinking. And it's really cool.
Yeah.
That's so good. It reminds me of when I was laying flat in that bed 23 hours a day for that almost a year. I was so resentful of what my body had done to me. Like, why did my body fail me like this? Laying there, because I was working at the university doing all the things, and the next day I couldn't even take care of myself. And so all this negativity was going on in my head. I was bringing myself down because of all the negativity. And I realized something had to change. But not only did I have to change it, like you said, Lisa, I had to replace it with something. And so I knew that I had to not only get rid of that negativity, but replace it with something. So I started listening to Tony Robbins, Dr. Wayne Dyer, Rumi, all of those luminaries. And that made such a difference to me. And so I think it's key, exactly what you said, that not only do we have to change it, but replace it with something that we want it to be.
Yeah.
Can I add just a little bit to that, and then I'll.
Stop.
We need to show ourselves compassionate curiosity as we explore this new way of being, these new boundaries, because they're going to be super uncomfortable. Creating change is not the most comfortable thing. Establishing boundaries is not the most comfortable thing, right? So have compassionate curiosity for yourself. Judgment will not help you in this situation. Step back and take that meta view. Where is it landing in your body so that you can recognize it in the future? But in addition to that, also showing yourself graceful accountability. Graceful, don't beat yourself up. Mm-hmm. Observe and be grateful for the knowledge. Accountability, don't let yourself off the hook. What do I want to choose differently next time?
Beautiful. Okay, so now we're almost at the end, but what I would love to do is if we can kind of just go around and everybody leave a little bit of wisdom around boundaries for the audience. Something that you really want everybody to know, like the one thing. Whoever wants to go.
I guess I'm going to come back to, what are you tolerating? I'm going to come back to that. Whether it's in the world around you, whether it's in your life, wherever it shows up in your body and your mind, explore that thought and see where it takes you. Because I think you'll find that there are lots of places where you can cut the chaff and really make things a little easier for yourself. And it's definitely a self-care exercise. With curiosity and care. Like, I love the compassionate curiosity.
Absolutely. I think we talked about this before we came live, that, excuse me, boundaries start with us. Boundaries start with us, within ourselves. And that's what I found laying in that bed, that it was me. I had to deal with me and what was going on inside of me first before I could even start to set boundaries with other people. And so I think it's very important for us to do that introspective work that it takes to realize what's there, what do I need to work on, and then I can go outside there to work on boundaries with other people.
Mm-hmm. I have two, but they really are intertwined, right? I have about 47, but we don't have time. So your boundaries are about you. It's sort of playing off what Amy was just saying. Your boundaries are about you. They're not about anyone else, right? So we need to own them. But also people will show you how firm your boundaries need to be. It's great. We can have fluid boundaries, right? We know there's certain people that we can have fluid boundaries with. We know the ones that we need to have firm boundaries with, and we can have loose boundaries with, right? But your boundaries are about you. And when you establish a boundary and someone isn't honoring it, that probably means that you're not necessarily honoring it, but it also tells you about them.
Mm-hmm.
Those
So
are those
good.
friends that have to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. So good. All so good. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming and joining us live. If you want to learn more about Amy, Susannah, and Lisa, you can go to the Real 50 Over 50 webpage. That's the easiest thing to do because they each have an individual page that has links to their websites where you can connect with them on social, learn a little bit more about them, see their pictures. And please do connect with them, and please come back and come back to this interview. It's going to live on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube, so you can come back. It's been full of great information, and we'll be doing more of these because there was a lot of excitement, even though we just announced it at like 5 o'clock in the morning. There was a lot of excitement about having a whole group together, and the energy has been great, and you have all been wonderful. So thank you for joining on no notice at all. And for collectively making this up. It's been wonderful. And we will be back next week with another Real 50 Over 50 woman, but who knows what might happen in between now and then.
Sure.
So thank you, and we will see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.